Lesson 34, A1 style formulas. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to enter A1 style formulas in a worksheet using a macro. Now this requires you to build a formula that's based on usually the current row number because we want to look at something in this worksheet. Let's get started. All right, I have a workbook here. It has item, date, and quantity, and I really need the item description added to this worksheet. And luckily I have another worksheet back here called lookup. Let's actually change the name of this to be lookup table. Formulas are more difficult when there's a space in the worksheet name, so we want to make this as difficult as possible to handle the hard case. So if we think about this, what we're going to have to do here is add a description field, and the description is formula is going to go in D2. Usually when I'm trying to do something new, I just turn on the macro recorder and see what kind of a macro I get as I do that. So we'll record a macro. I'll call it how to VLOOKUP. Store it in this workbook. Click OK. And I go ahead and enter the formula equal VLOOKUP. I want to look up that item number there in A2, and the lookup table's back here from A2 to B29. I want to press F4 to put the dollar signs in. Which column do I want? The second column, and then finally the word false. And we get our formula. I press Control Enter to stay in the exact same cell. And then let's just see what the code is to basically double click the fill handle and copy that formula down. All right, so we'll stop recording and switch over to VBA to see what we get. So we'll do how to VLOOKUP. We'll edit that. And we are completely lost because for whatever reason, Excel doesn't do formulas. They do something called formula R1C1. And if you look at the original formula here in the formula bar and look at the formula that we get as the result of the macro, it's using this ancient R1C1 style. And so this is very, very frustrating to me. And I end up just saying, all right, well, we're going to rebuild that using a style that we know, which is called A1 style. Okay, so we know that we're going to build a formula in range B2 dot formula, and it's going to be equal to something. We know that, right? So I always like to build the formula first, so that way I have something to model it on. I'm actually going to copy this formula from the formula bar and switch back to VBA, and I'll paste that formula in here, really just kind of as a comment, so that way I have an idea of what I have to start to work with. All right, and so we have equal VLOOKUP of A2 lookup table. The lookup table might actually be a variable number of rows each time, so we have to be relatively careful with that. We might need to build that sort of on the fly in order to be safe as the lookup table grows. Certainly we'll add more products before this macro stops being useful. So we have the first part of the formula here, and I need to figure out what the final row is. Final row is equal to worksheets, and then in quotes, lookup table dot cells rows dot count comma 1 dot end XL up dot row. So now we have a variable called final row, and I'm going to concatenate that right here. So ampersand final row. So where this is 29, it will automatically grow now as the formula grows. And then another ampersand, and we can switch back and just use the rest of our formula from the comment up here. So everything after and including that last comma we'll put in there. Okay, so that comment is there as a nice model of what we want to put in. We enter our first formula, and then I need to copy that down. I'm going to go back and look at the code that was recorded when I double-click the fill handle, selection.autofill, and then it hard-coded a destination. A little bit frustrating that it hard-coded a destination that we had 99 rows. So I'm going to copy that logic, but I'm going to try and make it a bit more flexible for us. So we'll come back to our module where we're actually building this and Control V. So it's going to be range b2 dot autofill, and the destination is going to be range b3 colon, and we are going to go down to b, but we're not quite sure how many rows it's going to be. We're going to have another variable, so let's create that here. I'm actually going to copy this one, Control C. Final row. This time I'm not going to specify a worksheet. I'm just going to do cells rows.count, comma 1. That'll refer to the current worksheet. So we'll get a different final row here. This will be the number of records we actually have in our data set. And I will concatenate that here in the range, ampersand final row. And so that should copy our formula down. All right, so we're going to try this. I'll get rid of all the descriptions and we'll actually see if it's going to work. Also, the module that I recorded, that was just a temporary module. It certainly doesn't work. It's not flexible like the one we just built. So I could delete those lines of code, or I can actually right-click here and say remove module 2. Do you want to export it? No, that's okay. All right, and so all traces of that recorded macro are gone, and we're left here with just module 1. All right, so let's try this out. We'll run it a line of code at a time. I click in here and press F8. Of course, it jumps right over the comment. Final row. Let's see what that is. So we'll print the final row is row 29, and I can go check and make sure that that worked. Yes, there were 29 rows in the original table. Range b2.formula. I'll press F8, and oh, very bad. Didn't work at all. Again, I should have saved the workbook before I ran that. So we want that to go in D2. So down here, we're going to D. All right. And that was 9/3/2009. All right, so we'll run it again. Press F8, press F8. There's my VLOOKUP formula. Let's go look and see how it looks here in Excel. A2 to B29 looks good. All right, and so now we'll try to figure out the final row here. Let's see what that final row is. It's row 100. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Perfect. And then finally run the last line of code to copy it down. It didn't work. Press F8. There we go. So the autofill has to include the original cell. All right, so looks good now. Here's the big test. We'll try and add some more rows to both the table and the data and see if it's flexible enough to handle that. So I'm just going to copy all of this data down to the end. So now we have 191 rows. In my lookup table, I'm just going to add a bunch of new rows here. Doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to make sure that the formula grows and shrinks as we add more data. All right. So at the top, macros, add descriptions. All right, and the VLOOKUP now goes through row 38. That's great. Did it get copied all the way down to the end of our data set? Yes, it did. Perfect. All right, so now we've automated the process of adding a new A1 style formula. One interesting problem here that we want to talk about, let me add something that says we want to look for maybe earrings. And so the formula here, it starts out with a find function. We want to look for earrings within the text to the left of us. And that is going to return a value error if it's not found, and it's going to return a number if it is found. So that formula, we want to say equal is error. Press Control Enter, and basically now it's perfect except for all the things that don't contain earrings say true, and all the things that do contain earrings say false. So I'm going to use another function, the not function. So equal not is error, and I'll press Control Enter. Okay, so that's the formula that I want to use. That's the formula that I want to use, and I'm going to copy that formula. There's an interesting problem when your formula has quotation marks. So let's go take a look at VBA. We'll go over to Visual Basic, and I want to add a formula to E. All right, so equal not is error. Okay. So range E2, and I'll erase all of the old formula and copy this formula over and put it in the quotes. But here's the interesting problem. The quotation mark starts the formula and the quotation mark ends the formula. So when it gets to this quotation mark here and this quotation mark here, that is going to radically confuse Excel. It thinks that it's the end of the statement. So if your formula has quotation marks, you need to put two quotation marks. Two quotation marks in a row is the way to tell Excel that you want one quotation mark to appear. So quote, quote is the secret code for, hey, put one quote here, but don't actually end this string that I'm putting together. So let's do a quick test here. Range E2 dot autofill, and we go from E2 to final row. Perfect. Big test. Run the macro. Having problems with the autofill today. Continue to run the macro, and we see that the items with earrings are called out as true. That looks good. Got copied all the way down. All right, so this is it. This is the A1 style of formulas. It's a bit of a pain, I'll be honest with you, because you have to enter the formula once and then use autofill to copy it down, or enter the formula once and use copy to copy it down. The macro recorder won't do this for you. The macro recorder is going to use something called R1C1. R1C1 seems kind of silly. It's 15 years old, and so most people, when they start recording macros, they just get rid of that formula R1C1 and they switch over to A1 style, which means they have to write that bit of code on their own. When I switched over from Lotus to Excel and I started writing Excel macros instead of Lotus macros, the first bits of code that I actually had to write were putting the formulas in, because I didn't like the way that the macro recorder did the formula R1C1. Now, in the next lesson, lesson 35, we're actually going to take a look at R1C1. I really encourage you to watch that. You could just skip it, to be honest, but it really is a better style formula. And if you take 15 minutes to master the R1C1 style, your macro code is going to shrink dramatically. Very compelling style. It's almost like the VHS versus Beta, where the folks at VisiCalc and Lotus used A1 style. The folks at Microsoft in Multiplan and Excel used R1C1 style. Today, A1 style won because more people were using it, but when you actually get down to it, the R1C1 style is a better and smarter way to write your formulas. Certainly in VBA, it'll save you some lines of code as you're trying to do that. Well, this was lesson 34. I hope you found this lesson helpful, and thanks for watching.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than Live Lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live Lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.